The Bear Essentials podcast gives older bears a place to gather for real talk regarding topics and issues that they can relate to. Here at The Bear Essentials, we aren't just having conversations. We are looking to provide actionable intelligence through real-life experience and expertise of our guests. Our mission is to build a strong community that elevates and motivates people to go beyond their limiting beliefs by helping them realize that getting older is not an excuse to hibernate on their goals, but a reason to work harder.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for tuning in. I'm your host, Charles Wallace. I'm extremely excited to be interviewing today's guest. He is a fear management expert, a self-defense expert, and his courses, including his SPEAR system, have been taught to some of the most elite fighters around the world, ranging from Tier 1 operators to terrorist hunters. Tony Blauer, he's had a career that has spanned over 4 decades, and trust me when I tell you this, he is truly a badass. So, without further ado, let's jump right into my interview with Tony Blauer. Hey, Tony, how you doing? Thanks for joining me today. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks, Charles. I'm excited to be here.
Tony, for the audience who may not be familiar with you, could you give a little introduction of yourself?
Yeah, I don't know where to start because I'm an old guy, but it's funny. I don't have an elevator speech. You'd think after 40 years of business, I'd have like a little 2-minute elevator speech. I teach people how to protect themselves emotionally, psychologically, and physically. We've got a program called No Fear, which is all about fear management, but we also have probably the world's only and first behaviorally based approach to self-defense, where we're using physiology, kinesiology, and psychology, combining that. It's kind of like the neurobiology of self-defense. And so that's what I do. And I've been doing that for decades. Started in my officially professionally in 1980. Now, the company's grown. We're one of the most trusted consulting companies. We work with law enforcement, military, corporations, individuals, and it's all about safety, security, mindset.
Hi, everyone. Here at the Bear Essentials podcast, we talk a lot about never hibernating on your goals. Well, that takes a certain mindset. It takes a primal mindset. So please, be sure to check out our sponsor, Go Primal. And while shopping their website, GoPrimalUSA.com, be sure to use code BEAR10 and get 10% off your purchase. Trust your instincts. Go Primal. Yeah, Tony, it's an interesting career. You've obviously been doing it for a long time. It's needed too by people. I firmly believe that. How did you get started into this field?
Growing up in the 60s, I was, what's the best way to describe this? There was no iPad, so you weren't, your mom didn't sit in front of an iPad and learn from that. So I was in front of a TV, and the TV back then was very limited, but there were the classic shows, the Wild Wild West and Mannix and Streets of San Francisco. And hopefully this is resonating with your demographic and they remember that. But, here I am, 6, 7, 8 years old, the original, Batman and Green Hornet. And I'm sitting there, but I was always transfixed by any type of action, like hand-to-hand stuff. And I was a good all-round athlete. And I could pick up any sport very easily, but I was never great. And I realize now the reason I was never great is because I was always scared. And that was very profound. And in some ways, I'm obviously sad or disappointed philosophically that I didn't recognize that when I was young, because it was, I'd be up at bat somewhere going, don't strike out, don't let down the team, but there was this wrestling match in my mind where I went, and I know that I'm good. Like, why am I striking out? I know that I'm good. Why did I lose that wrestling match? I know that I'm good. Why didn't I hit that jump in this gymnastics? Years later, when I developed the whole No Fear program, and for people who can't see the video, it's spelled KNOW, meaning to know fear, to understand it, to use fear as fuel. I realized that's what was preventing me from hitting now what neuroscience refer to as the flow state, where you're just in the zone. And so that fascinated me. And I got, I guess, probably the most pivotal origin story for me. I was about 12 years old. I got jumped by two guys leaving a baseball game. And they were 15-year-old kids from the high school up the street. And they punched me out, basically said, "Welcome to high school." It was like one of those things. I wasn't hurt. I was just overwhelmed and surprised, but I wasn't physically hurt. But I went home and I told my dad that two guys just jumped me. And it was like 1972, end of the year. And there was only one Taekwondo school open near me. And my dad said, "You got to learn some self-defense." So I got signed up at that school, and I went in, and it was like, as soon as they were doing stuff, I went, "Oh my God, this is what, Robert Conrad, James West was doing, when he chop and punch out people." And so I was like, wow. And I thought in that moment, Charles, like all of my fears would evaporate because I was going to be empowered by the martial arts. And I was a fanatic. I trained every day. I went to every class I could. And about 6 or 8 months later, Bruce Lee passed away, 1973. And then so I kind of stepped into the martial arts at the golden era of that whole, the Bruce Lee craze. And like everyone in the world, became a Bruce Lee junkie and was, and very influenced by all of that. And that was really it. And but something, and listen, there's millions. You were a Bruce Lee junkie. Everyone loved Bruce Lee. But there was something, and it's funny because every fan goes, "No, I was his biggest fan." And every fan was like, "No, but there was something in it where I said it spoke to me. And I was 15 years old. I'm on the floor doing the splits, looking at a Bruce Lee, we're working on the splits, looking at Bruce Lee. And my mom walks by, and we had a family business that was fairly successful, 2 generations. And she says to me, "What have you decided what you're going to focus on in school? Are you going to be a lawyer or a doctor or a veterinarian, an astronaut?" You couldn't be an influencer back then. It was just right. There were no pronouns back then. It was just, those occupations. And, police officer, firefighter. And I looked up from the floor and I said, "Mom, school's not going to be a big thing for me. I'm going to be a famous martial artist like Bruce Lee. I'm going to develop my own self-defense system." And she pat me on my head and said, "Okay, dear, we'll talk about this when you're older." But like I knew, man, and it's not, like about my background. We've now, for people who don't know, we've worked with all the acronym agencies. We worked with governments all over the world. And we've been doing this professionally. Like in 1993, I closed my martial arts school. And for full time, for 29 years, I have taught like professionally with my team to governments, like countries, their entire, like I don't want to list all the names, but from prison services to undercover to military it's crazy what it's grown into. So when I think back at that conversation when I was 15, and my mom just passed away last year, and it was pretty heavy, and we talked about that. She goes, "I remember that." She says, like, I can't believe you did it, but I freaking knew, man. But it wasn't like somebody presented me with a secret scroll and went, here's how you do it. Because what we do is different, and our whole approach to managing violence and fear was organic, and it was born out of the loss of my very first student in 1980. So it's pretty, and I love sharing the story because it wasn't like I got really good at Taekwondo and then I won a world championship, and now because I'm the world champion, people are listening to me. Nobody wanted to listen to me. Everyone wanted. In fact, I was so ostracized by the conventional martial art community for decades. Who do you think you are, Bruce Lee? like
Mm.
coming up with your own system. And I'd look at them, I'd scratch my head. I go, didn't Bruce Lee invent his own system? Yes, he did. Well, why is it okay for him? Shut up. Right. Like there was like, anyways.
It's because he was Bruce Lee, right?
Right. Right. It's funny. A buddy of mine, do you know Rudy Reyes? You know the name Rudy Reyes?
I don't, sorry.
He's a former recon Marine, pretty famous on the internet. All right, guys. Six dogs here.
No worries.
Come say hi if you're gonna bark. But Rudy, who's been a lifelong martial artist, he's insane. I'm gonna show you real quick because it'll be funny. You released this recording, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So you're gonna love this. Real Rudy. I'm gonna show your audience if they can see this. But the guy, let me see if I can. Wow. I mean, look at the physique on this guy.
Yeah.
I think he just turned 50. I mean, He's just an insane specimen. I'm always teasing him, going, I'm going to buy you a shirt, and could you stop taking your shirt off around? You're making me feel bad. But I've been friends with him for years, and we were talking one day, and he shared with me a story he had with his kung fu master. And he asks him one day, he goes, hey, Sifu, do you think that you could have taken Bruce Lee in a fight? And the guy looks at him and says, not if I knew he was Bruce Lee. And I thought that was such a genius answer, right? Because, we put people up on this pedestal and we go, oh my God, that's Bruce Lee. And then we're in awe and intimidated and stuff like that. So, and I'm sure you'll experience this as you grow your podcast, where you're like, okay, I'd love to get this guy on the show, but he would never come on my show. I don't have enough audience. I don't have an attraction. And who the hell am I? And you get this like vibe of imposter syndrome, or I don't, whatever it is. And it's that, right? I can beat this guy. Oh, wait a minute. It's Bruce Lee. No, I can't beat him.
And I'll hang tight, everyone. We'll be right back after a word from NGBN TV.
Hey, Charles, I just wanted to welcome you and all the Bear Essential listeners and watchers to NGBN.TV. My name is Chris Rubio, and I'm the host of The Rubio Method. We are a show about men's mental health that comes out every other Wednesday. With myself and my co-host Nick Monahan, we navigate the zone of men turning into middle age and going through health crises, whether it's mental, physical, and we have a good time while doing it. We tell a lot of funny stories. We have great interviews and guests, and it's just an all-around good time for about a half an hour to 45 minutes. So make sure you check out the Rubio Method as well on NGBN.TV, YouTube, Spotify, Google, and Amazon podcasts. And once again, from the Rubio Method to the Bear Essentials, welcome to NGBN.TV.
I mean, truth be told, and I told you this before we started, you were somebody that I wanted to have on, when I first started this, and I'm like, hell no, I'm not going to reach out to Tony Blauer yet. And then, a few weeks ago, I'm like, you know what? Let me try. Who knows? But again, thank you.
Yeah. Before you go to the next question, the famous Wayne Gretzky quote of you miss 100% of the shots you don't take.
Yes.
And for like everyone out there, whether it's dating or business or asking for a raise or defending yourself, you miss 100% of the shots you don't take. And all of that, at the end of the day, when you peel that onion, it's really about identifying a fear and then managing that fear. And the biggest share I can offer right now regarding my research and our system is this idea that, fear, especially for males, we don't want to talk about it. We don't want to be vulnerable. We don't want to be, and it's such an important thing is that when you manage fear, you actually move towards self-actualizing who you actually could be. It's when we step back or we allow the fear to impact us in that way. So, it's a huge thing when you peel every single onion, because people love to rationalize why they do things and don't do things. And you've seen, of course, that play on words. If you put a hyphen in the word rationalize, it's a rational lie you're telling yourself. So fear management is truly a superpower.
Yeah, it definitely is. And great segue actually. So there's a quote that you have, I think it's your quote, and I love it. And it's something that I really try to think about a lot. And it's you can't be brave if you're not afraid.
Mm, that is my quote.
And I feel like that kind of, how does that, Tony, how did that impact the whole thing? I wanted to get into now based on that quote. How does that impact like what you did, your study, your like looking at the whole fear by the neuroscience of it, all of that, and then ultimately developing your spear system?
Well, so, as I mentioned earlier, I was always plagued by fear, but I never knew how to talk about it. In fact, even to today, 2022, people still don't know how to really coach people through it, in my opinion. It's not just a battle cry, fuck fear,
Mm-hmm.
even though that's on my wall behind me, but I'll get to the acronym after. Uh, and But I didn't, if I had known what I know now as a kid, maybe I wouldn't be teaching self-defense. I'd be, a retired world champion skier, because that was my main sport growing up in Canada. Uh, Meaning, had I excelled in something else, I might have gone off in a different direction. By falling in love with the martial arts with the hopes that it empowered me and answered the questions, and it didn't, which is why I ultimately did what I forgot I told my mom I was going to do when I was 15. I developed my own system, but I developed that because I was so invested in helping others. And it was a serendipitous journey, of course, big fancy word for us doing this, and this other really great shit happened.
Mm.
I didn't know that that's what was going to happen. When I started teaching, it was accidental. I was working in my dad's office. I was a shipper at the company. So, I didn't even have like a management position. It was like, hey, you're starting at the bottom if you want to be in the family business. Boom, get in the back, sweep the back, unpack some boxes. And I was that, but I would work out every day. I'd be like Rocky in the back when we'd empty the boxes, I'd be wailing on the boxes. And one day I'm working out, I'm hitting one of the boxes, and my dad's good friend and client, this guy, Joey, says to me, hey, looks like you've known me my whole life. He says, you're getting really good at this martial arts stuff. He said, my son is having a bully issue in school. Would you train him? So I started teaching Mitch, and then Mitch's brother wanted a class, and then Derek across the street. They lived in a wealthy area. Literally, so I'm working 40 hours a week for my father and sometimes weekends, but every night and every weekend I would go teach privates. And I did that for almost 6 years straight. And I had 40 privates a week. And I was like in so much momentum, but the whole fear management came out of while I was so passionate and obsessed with teaching and doing all this stuff, it hadn't occurred to me, oh my God, I'm actually stepping into that dream I shared when I was 15. It was just so busy. It was like, okay, I finished work at 5. I got to hit traffic and get over here because I got a private lesson at 6. And years went by, but every student, because I was only teaching privately, every student had fear of doing stuff. And I would intuitively figure out how to help them overcome their fear, whether it was trying to punch me or getting away from attack and remember this, I was 20 and these kids were 15, 16, 17. So while I was older and a mentor to them, I wasn't like I was 50 talking to a 17-year-old and they go, you remind me of my grandfather.
Mm-hmm.
I was young enough, cool enough, hip enough that they go, hey, Coach B, there's this girl I like at school, but I don't know. And so it wasn't that I was like their therapist, but I realized what I was doing. I was noticing and then creating solutions on managing all types of fear. And these kids were getting more and more confident because they were sparring also an adult, because it was all one-on-one.
Mm-hmm.
And it was just weird. That's why I say serendipity. My incubator period was the 80s. And I eventually, in 1986, I was contracted by Panther Productions, which was the world's biggest. You might remember that from the magazines. They had like every martial artist in there, from Paul Vunak to Joe Louis and Bill Wallace. They had all their videos. And I went out and gave a demo tape to Joe Jennings, the owner of this new way to practice self-defense. And he looked at it and he was like, holy shit, you guys are really fighting. Because we were like really doing scenarios. And I was like, yeah, I mean, that's how you learn. And so he hired me. We did 6 videos. But the first video we did there, remember, it was 1986, was called Cerebral Self-Defense, The Mental Edge. I had for 6 years, by teaching all these kids, I call them kids, these other teenagers, figured out a methodology to help people manage fear in what would be inarguably the most stressful day you could have, right? So if I said to you, go ask this woman on a date, you're like, oh man, what if she rejects me? Go tell your wife you want a divorce. Oh my God, that I cannot. Go tell your kid that you're taking away their car or their phone. I don't like people hate conflict. And the fastest way to understand that is through managing violence. And I accidentally discovered that through the type of sparring. I mean, like I said, I don't know if I mentioned, we were doing Fight Club stuff before Fight Club was a thing. Like it was crazy. And you would get these insights. Anyways, I'm rambling here, but the point is the evolution of the fear management and this idea you can't be brave if you're not afraid evolved out of all of that, working with this rape victim, this sexual assault victim, this person who'd been mugged, this person who is an amateur boxer who was afraid, of their next fight, that people started reaching out to me going, hey, you do all that psychology stuff, right? And then I remember going to a big fight where Benny Urquidez was fighting and Maurice Smith. It was in Vegas. It was actually Benny Urquidez's retirement fight. And the president of the World Kickboxing Association comes up to me and he says, hey, you're Tony Blauer, aren't you? And so I make a joke going, do I owe you money? I don't, maybe not. But I know him. So he laughs. He says, man, you're like the Anthony Robbins of self-defense. And, like if you love Anthony Robbins, it's a huge compliment. If you don't, it's an insult. But it was a compliment to me because he was a powerhouse in positivity and mindset. Mm-hmm. And he actually had me go work with Maurice, who was sick and coming off a loss in a fight in Japan. And he was the headliner, other than Benny the Jet, on this first American pay-per-view on ESPN or something. Mm-hmm. It was huge. And he basically said he can't lose this fight. Like it'll affect all his sponsorships, his contracts, the show. Would you go talk to him? And so like my self-defense aside, people really started going, hey, tell me more about this fear management, this mindset, this adaptive courage. But the slogan, you can't be brave if you're not afraid, evolved much later. But this is what I noticed in the 80s, because we would do these force-on-force scenarios, 3-on-1, 6-on-2, gang, 1-on-1, and we would do them as scenarios, not as sparring. That was the big difference. And that forced you to think about de-escalation and avoidance and things that's typically not talked about or taught properly in conventional martial arts, where the instructor will say, guys, avoid violence at all costs. But if you need to defend yourself, here's some moves. And then you spend 99% of the time doing the moves. And I realized that was flawed, because where we experience the fear spike and get nervous and then screw up what we physically have to do is in the pre-fight, not during the fight. If you lose your shit during pre-fight, that's where stuff happens. And so I noticed this, where I'd look at people getting ready to do these scenarios, and they'd be nervous, and you'd be sitting on a bench, and I'd go, okay, Charles, put the headgear on, you're up next. And you'd see the guy go, and I'd come over and do a little pep talk. What are you thinking? What are you doing? Remember this, do this, do this. Or we would debrief after. And what emerged out of that was this slogan: the people who manage their fear manage to fight. Mm-hmm. Say it again. The people who manage their fear manage to fight. And the caveat to that is it didn't guarantee victory, but it guaranteed you were in the fight. And if you were in the fight, that affected your confidence after the fight, even if you lost. It impacted your dignity, your self-esteem. So now you could be proud of your scar. You could go, yeah, I was in there. That just wasn't my day, and what did I learn? But that was really, like, I use the term incubator period, the 80s, where no fear evolved, my hide your suit, the spear system, which is a whole other story on how that evolved. But that's the only system in the world where we look at the neurobiology of survival and look at what your body is designed to do at a neurological level. If I jump through the camera here, your hands would come up and you go, what the I don't know if can I swear on your show?
Yeah, go for it.
It's like, if I jumped through the camera here and popped up the other side, you wouldn't do wax on, wax off. You go, what the fuck, man? And your hands would come up, finger split, cover your head, you push away danger. And I figured out an entire protocol and system around weaponizing the startle flinch, which is like our biological airbag. It's fucking amazing. And that sounds like some people who are selective listeners think I just said I'm amazing. I'm saying the human body is amazing. We are human weapons, and it fascinates me, and I love coaching it because hardwired in you is this startle flinch. If I poked you at a pinprick, you'd pop away from it, your hands would come up, and you'd turn around, but you wouldn't strike me. You'd like, what the fuck? So there's this instantaneous reaction to protect the command center of our head from violence and danger. The problem is that movement is also inspired by both physiological fear and psychological fear. And if you don't understand that, if you don't create that self-awareness, that's where people who get scared flinch, cover, and turn, but then they're immobilized by the fear. They can't get back in the fight, which might be to run or to charge the threat.
That's really interesting because I'm literally growing up in the 80s, but I have, two brothers along with two sisters, but we had that mother and father at that time who were very like, listen, you're going to have times where you get your ass kicked.
Yeah.
But you can't, my dad used to say to us, literally, Tony, he'd say, listen, I'm not saying fighting is the way to finish it or whatnot. He goes, but I will tell you this, always consider whether you're going to run or not, because usually if you're going to run, you're going to be tired and out of breath. They're going to catch you. You're going to have to fight anyway.
Right.
So he really kind of instilled in us at an early age, like, there's going to be times in life, unfortunately, where you have to fight. And him growing up, he's a little older than you, but him and my uncles, there were like 12 of them. So you can imagine, right? It was, right. They were trying to show us self-defense. You know what I mean? And, some of the stuff, it was now, I'm bringing it up because I saw a video of you and you were teaching something that Tony, I swear to God, I remember my dad. It was a video of you saying, like, where somebody is getting aggressive, hands on hips, your hands come here. Always keep your hands higher than their hands. Yeah. When I saw that video, I was like, holy shit. Like, my dad told me that. And then when you said you kind of turned to give less target, I remember my dad literally saying, hands up higher, step back with your right. Now you look like you're trying to like be de-escalate, but you're ready to go. Right. And it's kind of what you said, but that's. So
let me say something about that. I don't know if you noticed, I had a big smile on my face because, the system that I teach, I said it earlier, well, it's the only system that incorporates the neurobiology, like the startle flinch element. Everything else was reverse engineered by studying violence. Mm-hmm. So it does not surprise me that someone like your father, who had experienced violence or had been taught by somebody who had, mm-hmm. and was able to pass that on, arrived at similar insights, and when you look at some of the simplicity of that, where guy's got his hands here, and so maybe you go arms crossed and he goes here and you go hands up, mm-hmm. and you always want the high ground. Well, have you ever seen like a castle that was built on a beach? There probably are some, so it's a bad metaphor, but most castles you want the high ground. So this idea of being up above and being able to see something coming from it, it doesn't surprise. I had a big smile on my face because that's cool. That makes sense to me. And so when I'm teaching or my team is teaching, we can be so passionate about the stuff because we know it's rooted in logic and behavior. And I love this reframe because people go, oh, it's just common sense. And I go, no, it's uncommon sense. If it was common sense, everybody would do that. But not everyone does. I mean, how many times have you seen two guys squaring off and they're nose to nose and one guy's got his hand in face, the other guy's got his hands down, right? It's not common sense, but uncommon sense is you see it once, you hear it once, and you're like, oh, fuck, yeah, that's so obvious. And then you remember it.
And it's just, and you say that common sense, right? The other thing that I remember my dad teaching us when we were young, he always used to say, if you're ever in a street fight, he said, the ground is your worst enemy. He said, and what he meant by that was, he said, if you get into a body lock and somebody in the momentum, you're starting to fall down. And you know how if you fall down, your head will whip back and smack the ground.
Right.
He would teach us at like 6, 7 years old. If you feel yourself falling back on the street in a fight, you tuck your chin, cinch your jaw tight, tuck your chin so that your head doesn't whip back. It was just common sense stuff, but it was stuff that I remembered and took further into life. But I mean, and then like I see the things that you show and teach, and it's amazing. So at this point, from what you observed, do you think the whole fear aspect, do you still feel like, because we see it a lot, right? You see a lot of people may have all the physical tools. Are you confident still that even though they know what to do, that their mind, they'll still be able to do it under duress?
No, that's a great question. And that's really like the secret sauce is there's lots of people who are super talented musicians, boxers, kickboxers, grapplers, business people, but when they're asked to do something on the next stage up from their comfort zone, they hesitate, they freeze, they back off, they redirect. That's what stage fright is. That's what fear of public speaking is. And I make a public speaking like joke to give you an example. So people will hire me now, and it's interesting. Now I'm getting hired by companies, corporations, business people, like individuals going, I need help with this. They recognize because fear is everywhere. Fear, this is on my website, but fear throttles everything we do. Throttles everything we do, from who we talk to, therefore who we marry and who our friends are, from how much money we make, because I'm afraid to ask for a raise or to go out on my own, to what job I have, to if you're in fitness, you could be warming up with a certain weight and I add more weight than you're comfortable with. And now you're in the fear loop. And if you're lifting in the fear loop, you're tighter and you're thinking about, missing the weight. Nowhere is it more important than if you need to defend yourself, because all other problems in the world, I've got a bias for self-defense, of course, but all other problems in the world can be solved by phoning somebody. You got a toothache, you can YouTube it and figure out how to do it yourself with a pair of pliers, but you're probably going to go to the dentist, right? Your roof is leaking. You could YouTube and go, I'm going to get up there on a ladder, but you're going to call a roofer. You are about to get jumped, attacked, road rage, home invasion, robbery, burglary that you walk in on. You don't even time to dial 911. You're the first responder in your fight. So my bias is making sure that people are safer. And in that is this idea that in order to look in the mirror and go, I will protect myself and my family, I need to understand fear. I got to get to know fear. I got to make fear my fuel. So to come back to your question, full circle on that, you can get really good boxing or, you've written, there's some notes I made for a talk I got to do later. You make your notes and then you get in the audience and like the most intimidating person in the world is sitting in the front row and you're like, oh my God, I didn't know so-and-so was going to be in the audience. And now you're like, oh, fuck, okay, don't fuck this up. And now suddenly you can't talk. And so people will say to me, oh, I'm afraid of public speaking. And that's the number one fear in the world. You probably know that. You probably heard that. And I've done talks like this, literally where I'm on stage. I remember this one talk, I had 400 people in the audience. I'm in an amphitheater at a university. And I said, what's the number one fear in the world? And they all, all these university students yell, public speaking, public speaking. I said, so you would rather not give a speech but get dragged to a secondary crime scene and get raped? They were like, what? You'd rather be eaten by a shark than give a speech, because it was public speaking, sharks, loss of security, loss of a loved one. You're like it's amazing how weird the list is, right? But number one has been for years and years public speaking. And I go, and so I've had people, Charles, go, hey, can you help me with my public speaking? And I go, yeah, sure, but you don't seem to have a problem. And they go, what do you mean? I go, well, you're talking fine to me. You seem to articulate and you formed a sentence. You said my name right. I understand you. What do you mean you're afraid of public speaking? And they go, ha ha, very funny. I'm talking about it in front of people. I go, well, are you married and do you have kids? They go, yeah. I go, well, so what do you text your wife? Could you please pass the salt? Text your kid, hey, could you get off your phone? Like, how do you communicate? They go, very funny, Blauer. Like, I'm not afraid of talking to my family. I go, do you work in a business? They go, yeah. Do you have employees or staff or team? Yeah. So like, are you ASL? How do you communicate at work? They go, I talk to them. I go, so you're not afraid of public speaking. What you're afraid of is being on a stage and talking to a certain audience and bombing. You're afraid of an event in the future. And so we use this acronym, you've probably seen it, false expectations appearing real, where I'm visualizing a future event that involves my failure or my pain or whatever, but it's immobilizing me in the present. And that's really the secret to the program. So the guy who's, we go back to your question, somebody's trained, there's this assumption that they'll be able to manage their fear just because they're trained. And that's incorrect. You can see almost everybody who fought Tyson could have, if we had sparred them, they would have knocked us out in 3 seconds. They were gladiators, world-class fighters. And then they get in the ring with Tyson during his heyday, and they're like, whoa, whoa, whoa. They forgot all their skill because they were trying to not get knocked out. So what changes, so what a lot of people don't realize with regard to fear and the neuroscience in fear is that the mind navigates the body. And so when you go, I'm going to fire a punch, your brain has to select a target, select the move, and then your neuron has, some sort of education from training that says you're going to punch now. But if your executive function's been hijacked by your reactive brain, your fear, your limbic system, your amygdala is going, watch out for this guy, watch out for this guy. And it's so different. Think about this. You're speeding down the highway, I'll simulate here. I'm texting, I'm driving, and I know you're not supposed to text when you drive, but of course you and I don't do that, but everyone else does. And you're like this, and you're going fast, and you're looking, and you put that down, you look up, and then all of a sudden you look in the rearview mirror and you see a cop with his lights on. What happens to your driving right away? Slow down your brakes, you're nervous, you're tense, and then he whips by you, he's going after another call. But in the moment that you had a sudden stimulus that triggered a fear spike, your driving completely changed. Where you're nervous, you're apprehensive, you're watching the car beside you, you're pulling over, but your driving is very stiff and rigid, like a new driver. And if everyone can visualize that, imagine if you had to drive 5 hours somewhere with that same nervousness of, am I going to get a ticket? Like, that'd be fucking exhausting.
Yeah.
So in these weird metaphors, hopefully I'm trying to give like simple examples where if we go through life or our day worrying about whether we're going to get a metaphoric ticket, am I going to get in trouble for this? Am I going to get yelled at for this? Am I going to screw this up? Am I going to let down the team? Am I going to get knocked out? Is my business going to fail? It's exhausting. But most importantly, if we go full circle to like me growing up as a kid, as an athlete, I realized that I was at bat going, don't strike out, as opposed to go ahead, pitch it, man. I got this, and being excited. I got goosebumps right now. Being excited by the challenge of that moment, but I wasn't. I was afraid of that moment.
Yeah, Tony, that's all the everything you just said. I was actually feeling it as you were saying it and visualizing driving that way. Unfortunately, yeah,
it's real shit, man.
It definitely is. So to get real now, this is the biggest thing I wanted to ask you, and one of the biggest reasons I wanted you on here. I feel as we're all again getting older. I'm 50. I still have kids, some younger. I've still a 15-year-old daughter, 19-year-old daughter, and the world sucks sometimes, right? And it's like, mostly. how can as we get older, because we can't, right? Sometimes I look at it, I'm like, you know what? 10 years ago, 15 years ago, fuck off. It wouldn't have bothered me a bit. But now as we get older, what do you recommend as far as not just the fear, but even physically as we get older I'll say it bluntly, how do we not become easy targets?
Most of that is, and ironically, the most important thing that let me reverse engineer the answer. We have gunfighting courses, multiple assailant courses, ground fighting courses. We have courses you can't get into. You got to be active duty. And we have our no fear program. If you said to me, what is the coolest, most important, most effective of all the 16 different programs that you teach, tier 1 operators, terrorist hunters, SWAT teams, what's the coolest, the most important course I teach is the no fear course, because there are cops and there are soldiers that miss shots or miss a life-saving moment because of fear, whether it's their own fear or fear of prosecution or cancel culture or whatever. But fear creates doubt creates hesitation. If you're hesitating, you're an easier target, right? Violence loves speed. Business loves speed. Romance loves speed. Speed is everything. It's get this done. Hey, I got this great idea. Oh, sorry. That's already been copyrighted, trademarked, patented. Somebody came up with that and launched last week. Oh, fuck. Man, I thought about this 5 years ago, but then I waited 4 years before I started working on it. Don't confuse speed with rushing. Rushing's got a negative connotation. We don't want to rush, but you want to do things as fast as you can, as efficiently as you can, as effectively as you can. Mind speed requires self-awareness. Self-awareness improves critical thinking. Self-awareness and critical thinking improves my relationship and adaptation to situational awareness, meaning an external opportunity or an external stimulus. So if you want to be a hard target instead of a soft target, or if you want to be proactive in navigating your life, you need really good situational awareness. I was here. I saw that guy put a cigarette out and come off the wall. I paused. That wasn't a good sign. I stepped. I moved into this store. I started talking to the doorman there, and that guy just disappeared. And then I went to my car. I was here. I was reading something, and I heard somebody say, "Yeah, I got this huge business opportunity," and he mentioned something that's if I were sitting somewhere and someone goes, if only there was somebody who came up with a behaviorally based self-defense program that could help me and my family. You don't think I'd go, excuse me, I couldn't help but hear you. That's situational awareness. But if I don't have critical thinking, which is, how do I start this conversation? Should I start this conversation? And none of that happens if I don't have the self-awareness to go, you're afraid to put up your hand right now, or you're afraid to ask. You're afraid to. And everything in my life, if I look at all of those critical moments, that how did I meet Sugar Ray Leonard? How did I meet Robert Conrad? How did I meet Stallone? How did I, all these people that were actual role models growing up to me, I didn't buy an autograph from them. I actually developed relationships with them because I've got self-awareness and critical thinking skills. And then the situational awareness, I see an opportunity and I know exactly how I'm going to go. Am I scared doing it? And that's the big thing is, yeah, fuck yeah. I'm like, we call that the duress path in our program, where you know the plan, but you're going, man, I hope this works. So you're not totally focused. You're not totally in flow state. So your question's interesting because the soft target can be metaphorically the rocking chair test when you're 70, 80 going, I never jumped out of an airplane, or I never asked so-and-so to that dance, or I never opened that business, or I never told so-and-so that I was sorry and our relationship went like this, and whatever it is. The soft target part versus hard target part is really about managing fear, where something happens in the world and you go, stop. I've had enough. This is the line in the sand for me. But then we draw that line and we go, I'm kind of scared about drawing the line. Should I tell people that I'm drawing the line, drawing this line here? You know, I don't want to get canceled. Right. So look, I don't even recognize the world, certainly not America, right now with respect to that. We need fear management more than anything, because like I said, I promise you, fear management improves self-awareness. And self-awareness is literally the superpower to navigating your life. What do I want to do? You know, what do you want to be? You know, that thing of like, what's my purpose? Well, you can't develop the drive, the discipline, the resiliency to go after that if you don't have self-awareness, because you just don't know. And then when you get somewhere and you're rejected, or there's a hurdle or a roadblock or something happens, and you go, it's easy to go, I guess this wasn't meant to be, as opposed to, okay, that's called a fucking obstacle. And I'm resilient and I'm scared because I don't know what to do here. But, you know, there's a play on words of understanding the difference between being resourceful and resources. A lot of people are always looking and thinking they need resources to make stuff happen, not realizing that resourcefulness is the foundation to accessing resources. The only way you can be resourceful is if you can manage your fear. I mean, that's my 2 cents on that. So I hope that makes sense. You're a harder target when you go, I know myself and I know my boundaries are, I know my goals are. I got a vision, I got a mission, and I got goals in my life, and I'm going after them.
That's actually really great advice to me, Tony, honestly. And I think you went deeper than I was even thinking about it. I'll be totally honest. Like I literally posed that question to you more from a probably physical,
tactical.
Yeah, that. And then as you started to say it, I actually started to think about it, and like, and not even being funny, just last night we pulled up to a store with me and my daughter, and she's like, can I wait in the car? I swear, Tony, guy's sitting on the wall smoking a cigarette. I start to open the door. He stood up. I literally said to her, get out, walk around the back, let's follow me in the store. Nothing happened, but it was like, as you're saying that, I'm like, holy hell, like this is the stuff he means. But I think that's,
But it's interesting there. Nothing might have happened because he picked up that you were dialed in and situationally aware. And what was he going to do? Like, like maybe you accidentally leave the car running so she could listen to music and the air conditioning's on, right? And now he jumps in because you're in her. You don't think that happens? Of course that happens. And so, but that your situational awareness is augmented, optimized because you had a cool dad who taught you some cool shit, and you've done martial arts, and you're trying to, like, even just starting this podcast, expand your horizons, and it's making you be a better listener and think about questions, and that's helping self-actualize you. So you're continuing to grow and evolve, and you see that there. And, this, like anyone who trains with us knows we have our kind of like the overarching umbrella principle for everything we do is choose safety. That's our motto, choose safety. Never to be confused with playing it safe, which is a dangerous, almost boring, not dangerous, but boring, which can become dangerous way to look at any risk or challenge. Well, let's play it safe here, right? Should I go asset? Let's play it safe and not. And so choosing safety asks the question, what is the safest thing I could do here? Because there's no downside to choosing safety. The safest thing was, I see a guy just put out a cigarette, maybe he's leaving, but I'm not going to leave my 19 or 15-year-old daughter in the car running with the music on, or even just sitting here. There's no need to. And so you chose safety there without knowing the motto. You just selected that. But you did that because your situational awareness picked up on that. And then your self-awareness said, I'm going to exercise my critical thinking skill. And that is, hey, you walk around the back of the car and follow me.
Mm-hmm.
And if that guy was some sort of predator, he went, that guy's a hard target. I'm going to wait for somebody who's not paying attention. Now, I will say here, because you said my answer was deeper than you anticipated, everything we do in our system is about leading a smarter, more engaging life. And that's about managing fear. And I alluded to this earlier, the inarguably the worst day of your life could be sudden violence, because all other problems can be solved by consulting with a subject matter expert. Hey, I'm way overweight and my somebody says I'm at risk for this or that. Well, an expert will say, listen, change your diet. Here's your workout schedule. Do this, get some sleep, blah, blah, blah. You know, you've got, my business is losing money. We found the problem. It's this, cancel this, do this, market like this, you grow. But you turn around, you're in the store paying, and next thing you know, like there's this guys in your car. Like, what are you doing? Are you YouTubing what to do there? Are you calling 911? Like, it's done. So what I try to do, and it's by design on purpose, is everything we teach can't just be about physical violence, because that would be exhausting, right? That's like driving, 2 hours to a meeting, worrying about a cop pulling you over, as opposed to enjoying the drive and then noticing you're speeding and then noticing the cop and making the uncomfortable adjustment right there. And so that's about, managing fear and having a global, more behavioral approach to everything.
Well, Tony, honestly, I've always been a fan, like you growing up. I mean, I've always been a fan of martial arts, 80s, all of that, those movies, all about it. And I mean, I wanted you on this because to me, you are definitely a legend in that world. So you really, to me, thank you. This was like a thrill for me. And it was way more than I expected. I knew this was going to be a great time for me because I couldn't, as soon as you said yes, I'm like, oh my God, I can't believe I'm going to talk to this guy. Right. And, as it always usually happens, you ended up making me, I'm going to go away from here and think about this a lot differently. And I'll probably be on your website. You'll probably notice more traffic on your website because I'm going to be looking into this more. But speaking of that, Tony, how can people get in touch with you or what you're offering, or if they need training, whatnot, let you plug your stuff here?
Yeah. So, our main site, if you're just interested and go like, who is this guy? He said a couple of interesting things. Let's check it out. Go to our headquarters site. It's blauertrainingsystems.com, BLAUER trainingsystems.com, one word. And that'll take you to the 4 verticals in my company, our scenario training equipment, all of our physical training, the No Fear program, and then my coaching stuff. Like if you wanted to hire me or bring me in for a talk, or even we do tons of stuff on Zoom as well. But I would go there. But we've got everything. We've got like online courses for people who go like, I just want to like kind of dip my feet in the pool for a second. I don't want to commit. We've got online live 2-hour essentials of personal safety, which is an amazing course just on improving situational awareness, understanding some basic self-defense. We've got a Be Your Own Bodyguard program that we've been teaching since the 80s. It's a 1-day program. It's self-defense taught with the efficiency, effectiveness of like a CPR tactical first aid course. when you go do a stop the bleed course, or you're learning CPR and how to put on a tourniquet and stuff, these are 3-4 hour courses, 6 hour courses, and you're learning life-saving skills. I've taken our 40 years of studying violence, fear, and aggression and put this into a one-day course. You're not learning a martial art. So some people go, you can't learn martial arts in a day. No, of course not. You can't learn to box in a day. You can't learn jiu-jitsu in a day or Krav in a day, but you can learn the principles of detect, diffuse, defend, what bad guys want, what they don't want, the nonviolent postures that your dad taught you in 5 minutes, how that works, why that works, how to de-escalate, and then some simple primal gross motor moves. And then we've got, of course, more in-depth training. And then there's the fear management side but it's all there. Okay. I'm all over social media. Just Google my name. I'm shadow banned on a bunch of pages. So you might have to type my name in all the way, because our politicians don't want self-aware, critically thinking people. So my messaging is often shadow banned. Incredibly, it blows my mind.
Not surprising, but tell you what, you'll never be shadow banned with this guy, because you're the kind of guy that this world needs. And I just hope, what I just want to say to my audience now is, not just for yourself as an older man or woman, get your children comfortable with fear, because they'll turn into adults that are better adjusted. And fortunately, I had a father, sounds like Tony's family. I mean, I'm not Tony, but I'm somewhat comfortable, and just please instill that in your kids. So Tony, thank you so much, man. This has been an honor. And
thank you.
So thanks again.
Yeah, Charles, I want to add one thing here, because you just said it and I didn't really talk about it. But if you're a parent listening to this, or if you're not a parent, but you're an uncle or an aunt, I will tell you, go read about our No Fear program and consider gifting it to somebody you care about who's struggling with fear. And that might seem like a shameless plug, but I believe in this. If you listen to this talk and you don't think I'm for real, then you missed something there. I am so passionate about that. And I had you might have noticed I have 1 or 2 tattoos. The guy, one of my tattoo artists, good friend of mine now, nice. His name's Aaron Jackman. He runs Ghost Tattoo in Las Vegas, if you're ever looking for work. But this isn't to plug his shop and his work. He's got a 10-year-old son named Salem, who was struggling with and developing anxiety as a result of all the mandates, the masking. And his dad calls me one day and he says, is the No Fear program, because we do it live, we do it on Zoom, but we also have like a digital program that people can buy and listen to whenever they want. And he says, is it too old for my son, Salem? And I said, at the time I hadn't met him. I've met him many times now. I said, I don't even know your son, but it's not too old for you. And you're his dad, you're his coach, and you're his mentor. So you get it, and you figure out what you need to distill to him or disperse to him. And they got it. And the next time I was back in Vegas getting a tattoo, he hands me a handwritten letter, and I wish I had it in front of me. I didn't know we were going to talk about it. But he hands me, when's the last time you got a handwritten letter, Charles? Like, right? I get this handwritten letter from this kid, and it's thanking me. And he actually says the line that you asked me about. He says, dear Mr. Blauer, my name is Salem. And he thanks me, this 1-page letter, and he thanks me for the program. And he said, thank you for teaching me how to be brave when I'm afraid and how to turn fear into fuel. And he said, my dad and I, we work on this every week. We go through it and we talk about lessons. And I was thinking, my dad passed away several years ago, of what a very restricted and limited relationship I had with my father. And I was thinking about, here is a young dad with a 10-year-old son studying the psychology of fear and explaining it as it applies to sports and school and girls and mandates, and having this conversation about the psychology of fear. And I realized that this father and son are going to have an amazing relationship. And this kid is going to be better equipped 10-year-old Tony was up at bat going, don't strike out. You don't. I realized I wrote an article, goosebumps again. I wrote an article, I write every week. I don't know if you're on my newsletter. If not, you should be. But I wrote something like about a week ago where I realized that here I am, I'm 62 years old, and I've never told my father or mother when they were alive that I was afraid of something. And I never once told a coach that I was afraid of something. One of the kids that I was training for a kickboxing title, before his fight, he's warming up, we're doing pad work. And I said, Sean, how do you feel? And he said, good. And he looked at me, he says, I'm nervous, but I'm good. And I said, you're supposed to be nervous because you're about to get in a fight. And if you weren't nervous, I think there'd be something wrong with you. I'd be checking your temperature. And we went through it, and I asked him what he was nervous about. We peeled the onion. We came up with a strategy, and he went out and he won the title that night. But my fighters knew it was okay to say to me, Coach, fucking scared. And I go, that's okay. We're going to use fear as fuel.
Man, I'm glad you added that, because I hope that out of this whole podcast, I want people in general, but parents, to hear that, because I think it's powerful, Tony. So, Tony, again, thank you so much. Everybody, please check out Tony Blauer. To me, Tony is a legend in badassery, I'll call it. And I can't appreciate this enough. I thank you, Tony. Thanks everyone for tuning in. Take care. Bye.
This has been the Bare Essentials. Thanks for listening. And remember, never hibernate on your goals.